What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So the UFC may have accidentally leaked a bit of news. Now, the story is still developing, but there was a post that they put out that UFC 291 is gaining a lot of traction because it has not one, but two title fights on the card, which led people to question, well, we know about the BMF title, so what's the other title fight? The only sensible thing is that Jamahal Hill just vacated the 205 belt, and the co-main event is Jan Błachowicz versus Alex Pereira. So the common thinking is that they're going to go ahead and make that for the undisputed vacant belt at 205. Now, the UFC said it was a simple mistake, but what do you make of it?
I love a good leak, and every now and again we get some that seem pretty juicy, and I love that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that this fight will be for a title. You know, Jamahal Hill gave up the belt just like Yuri did, and I think it's very admirable what these guys are doing. They're not just trying to hold it and then, you know, sit out for 6 months while they're dealing with injuries and surgery and all that stuff. So it's actually pretty cool, the sort of code of honor that the 205ers are dealing with right now. They're like, we want this belt existing within the fighters that are currently able to fight. And if that means we have to sit on the sidelines and then have to get our chance later on down the road, then so be it. It's a breath of fresh air to see these champions doing that. But I also think the UFC cannot have a division that does not have a champion. And when you have Jan Błachowicz, who was the 205 champion, taking on Alex Pereira, who was the middleweight champion not that long ago, it just seems to make good sense. Not only that, the BMF belt is very much a real belt. It's more rare than the UFC gold, and there's only one of them, and as opposed to all the divisions that the UFC has. So I think that it makes sense that that is the main event. But when you're talking about selling a pay-per-view to people, they kind of do want to see that UFC gold on the line, at least in one fight. And while the BMF is very important, and I think that that will garner a lot of attention, I do think it would be wise for them to make this fight for the belt.
Yeah, and I don't see why they wouldn't, because the 205 division does need to move on. And talk about a division that is cursed. I mean, Glover wins the belt and then he gets dismantled by Jamahal Hill, and then Jamahal Hill wins the belt and he's injured, so he's out. He was playing a pickup basketball game. Yuri Prohaska's dealing with injuries. This seems to be like a division where if you happen to grab the belt, watch out, because you're probably going to be injured and have to vacate at some point in time. So very interesting what's happened at 205 since John Jones left the division. But that being said, I think that these two guys are certainly deserving. I don't think anybody would argue. Alex Pereira, his natural weight class is definitely 205. If you look at the guy, he's enormous. And I think the general consensus is that he's going to be able to take a punch better at 205, and he's going to hit a heck of a lot harder at 205 because he doesn't have to cut all that weight, which is scary if you consider how hard he hits at 185. And we all know what they call Jan Błachowicz, the Polish power. I expect this fight to be potentially fight of the night. I think we're going to get a finish of some kind. Honestly, I have no idea who's going to get the finish. I could see this fight going either way. I think it's going to come down to who zigs when they're supposed to zag, and that's going to be the fight. And I think that crowning one of these gentlemen undisputed champion at the end of the night will make for a great night of business. It'll set up for the BMF belt being put on the line thereafter, and it'll make 291 just a little bit more meaningful. Now, obviously, everybody wants to see Dustin and Justin get in there and throw down again, and that would sell a pay-per-view alone. But sometimes you need that little extra oomph, and I believe this fight, being for a title, could do that.
Absolutely. And it's really common for the UFC these days to put two belts on the line for their pay-per-view events, and I think this one deserves a UFC gold title fight. And when you have Jan Błachowicz in there going against Alex Pereira, you're going to get an amazing, exciting fireworks type of fight. But you're also talking about probably two of the number one contenders at 205, so it just makes good sense. And when you talk about that fight, the X's and O's of it are actually very intriguing, because Alex Pereira came on the scene and was known automatically as a really good striker. And then he came out and proved it. Yeah, okay, he's super dangerous. He's got wins now over Izzy, not only in kickboxing, but in MMA. And he's going to move up, and he's going to be able to outstrike everybody. And if he gets taken to the ground, it's probably going to be a rough night for him. But everybody forgets just how dangerous Jan Błachowicz is, not just with the single shot power, but he's really crafty with his striking and the way he comes up with his combinations, the way he chains together his striking into his grappling. Jan Błachowicz is a very complete fighter. He doesn't get the credit that he deserves for being the skilled fighter that he is. I think a lot of people see him, they've realized that they call him the Polish power, and they're like, okay, he probably just knocks people's heads off. But if you go back, he's lethal on the ground. He's got a lot of finishes through submissions. He can take the fight down when he needs to. He's very smart with his game plans, and his striking is underrated. Now, I believe Alex Pereira has better striking than Jan Błachowicz, but it's going to be a different ball ballgame, because while it's true that Alex Pereira probably always belonged at 205, he's going to be facing tougher guys, more durable guys at 205 than he was at 185. And I don't see him crumbling Jan Błachowicz like he was crumbling some of the guys at 185. I see this being a pretty competitive match for as long as it lasts, but I'm just like you. I think somebody's going to get knocked out.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. There's a couple variables here. One is how much harder is Alex going to hit at 205 when he doesn't have to cut all that weight, and how much more durable is his chin going to be? Because one thing we know about cutting extreme amounts of weight, it depletes your chin, which is probably one of the reasons why Izzy was able to just starch him with that KO in their rematch. And then the other is going to be how much improvements have been made with regards to Pereira's grappling. Now, we know his best friend and training partner is Glover Teixeira, who's one of the best grapplers that 205 has had in recent time. So being on the mats with him every day and grappling with him, we just saw Glover defeat Anthony Smith in a UFC Fight Pass grappling match. So Glover's still very active on the mats. He still rolls a lot, even though he's retired. And I'm sure he's an excellent training partner for Alex Pereira, and he's going to need it because Jan Błachowicz is very good on the ground. As you said, he's very crafty. He absolutely can submit you. They call him the Polish Power, but make no mistake about it, he's got submissions up his sleeve. So Alex is going to have to be able to defend the takedowns. I believe Jan will try to test and see how good his grappling is. So I'm interested to see how much harder he hits at 205, how much better his chin is, and how much grappling improvement he's made. And I think if he's good in all three of those areas, he will likely defeat Jan Błachowicz. But if there's a shortcoming, Jan's going to sniff it out, and it could be a short night for Poatan.
I totally agree, and I think Glover Teixeira might actually be the secret ingredient that Alex Pereira needs, because while he's a great coach and a great mind for fighting, he's also felt Jan Błachowicz. He went several rounds with him, and if there's anything after you go through a title fight camp with somebody and you've studied a person top to bottom, left and right, in every which way that you can possibly study them, you know everything that they're going to bring you, and every fighter is constantly evolving. But at this stage, Jan Błachowicz isn't going to change out who he is. He's the fighter that got him to the UFC belt and became a UFC champion, and I think Glover Teixeira might be able to devise a game plan for Alex Pereira that could be successful.
That's an excellent point.
Thanks.